Good evening, everybody, and welcome. We will call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. Dr. Reynolds, do you mind guiding us in the pledge this evening? Thank you. And if you want to pause for a moment of silence, as we keep our frontline workers, veterans, military in our hearts. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, sir. All right, moving on to 3.1, address agenda, recommend changes and consider approval of consent agenda. I would like to recommend a change, fellow board members, Ms. Contra, Dr. Reynolds, and that is moving 9.4 health data to the top of our discussion items to 9.1. Can I get a second on that?
A second.
Okay. Any board members have any other changes to the agenda, or would any board members like to pull any items from the consent agenda this evening? Ms. Hill? Okay. Dr. Sorensen?
No, sir.
No. Ms. Underhill?
No, thank you.
All right. Ms. Pingrilla? Good. Okay. All right. I do need a motion to approve the agenda, which includes the consent agenda.
I move to approve the agenda, including the consent agenda.
I second.
Ms. Contra, we have a motion by Ms. Underhill and a second by Dr. Sorensen. Board members, please cast your votes. Ms. Contra, can you run us through a voice vote while Ms. Pingarelli gets logged in? I apologize, board members.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Sandoval?
Yes.
Mrs. Underhill? Yes. Dr. Sorensen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hill?
Yes.
And Mrs. Pingarelli?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Contra. Moving on to Section 4 recognitions. 4.1 from Understand. We don't have any district recognitions, so we're going to go on to 4.2 board comments. Ms. Hill.
I do not have any comments at this time.
Okay. Dr. Sorensen?
No, sir.
All right. Ms. Underhill?
I just wanted to say quickly that I participate a little bit on the MET Advisory Committee, and I wasn't able to go yesterday, but was able to read the minutes and listen in, and I'm just so proud of that program, the MET that we offer, Medical Engineering and Technology program, and I just wanted to kind of comment that, in Peoria, we really strive to provide those types of programs, from the MET to Peoria Traditional to the Spanish Immersion program at Santa Fe to our CTE programs. All of those things, including our academic electives, and we do those things in alignment with our state standards. And I'm just really proud of the breadth of options and choices that we give to our families. So I just wanted to say that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Ms. Pingrell, while you long on, I'll go ahead and go with no comments. Okay, perfect. Yeah, for me, I really just want to say thank you. I know I've been close with the district this week and understanding, all that our district leadership is doing and collaborating with our site leaders, our teachers, staff, students, and families to really make informed decisions, which is important, as we move forward during these times. So it was definitely inspiring to hear the collaboration working and really to hear how the CR team, CRT team, sorry, is certainly functioning in a way, like I said, that does, collaborate with others, and also in a way that prioritizes the health and wellness of all those that we are responsible for. So thank you for that. All right, moving on to 4.3, superintendent comments.
Just a second while we update the agenda. You good? So if you refresh, your agendas will be reflect your requests. So thank you for that, President Sandoval, Governing Board, guests, Cabinet, welcome. Cactus High School graduate Alex Ramsberger, class of 2016, reached out to share that he was recently selected for the Air Force Pilot Training Program. He is a senior at the Air Force Academy right now and will graduate at the end of May. That's exciting news for him, and we love it when our graduates let us know how they're doing. We know that Lieutenant Colonel Zamora and the whole Cactus High School and the rest of the Cobras are proud of him, as well as the rest of the Peoria Unified family. And a big congratulations, huge congratulations go out to Sylvia Lopez, who is a Liberty High School student and also a second-year engineering student at the Met. Sylvia was selected as a Flynn Scholar semifinalist, and this is an incredibly prestigious scholarship in Arizona. And we know that becoming a semifinalist is no easy task. Only 80 high school seniors from Arizona were named as Flynn Scholarship semifinalists. The Flynn Foundation will announce the Flynn Scholars Class of 2021 in April, and we wish Sylvia the best of luck with this very, very prestigious merit-based scholarship. And that concludes my comments. Thank you, President Sandoval.
All right, thank you very much. And Dr. Reynolds, I do apologize. I think I did forget. As a reminder, this has been a standard in our board meetings. The district is still under the guidance of the county mask mandate. So we do appreciate your participation in wearing your mask appropriately across our entire footprint, including our boardroom as well as the podium during our public speaks. So thank you for that. Okay, moving on to public comment. 5.1, we do have many individuals who wish to speak this evening. So,
Two more came in. They were before the meeting, so they're
okay. So as always, it's absolutely appreciated that you've taken the time to attend the board meeting to express whether it be celebrations or concerns, that you may have. That is certainly why we have this line item in our agenda, to provide you as our community the opportunity to express your voice. And again, concerns that are not on tonight's agenda. As a reminder, as a board, we're not permitted to comment on any items that are not on the agenda. However, when appropriate, Dr. Reynolds and team will reach out to you to address, any issues that they feel need addressed. We do limit public comment to 30 minutes in its entirety, and each individual does have 3 minutes to speak, which will be on a timer, which Ms. Contra will help guide us through that. So that said, what I'm going to do, and Ms. Underhill, if you can help me with this, I'm going to just randomly go through the public comments that have come in, and we'll just continue along, as we and hopefully we can get through all of them, but if we can, I do apologize. But each board member will, if we can get some of the public comment, if you have it in draft form, and you're not able to actually publicly read it, if you can email it to the district, each board member will receive any of those public comments that were not read this evening. So thank you. So Ms. Under, I'm going to hand you these. If you can just shuffle through them and then just hand them to me one at a time. Thank you. This first public comment comes from Ms. Linda Busan.
Thank you, Governing Board members, for hearing me today. I called for the termination of the president and the treasurer of the PEA for using school resources during school hours to organize a sick-out on January 11th, causing 13 schools to close. I was told that somebody would get back to me, and nobody has. Parents are filing written complaints to principals who have 15 days to provide corrective action. Afterwards, a written complaint will be submitted to the superintendent as instructed by State Statute 15-110, asking for their termination. If these toxic teachers are not removed from our schools after 25 days of filing, which would be right around March 25th, we will collectively file a formal complaint with the Attorney General's office for the inappropriate use of taxpayer dollars in our schools. On another note, forcing teachers to watch CNN as factual news and teaching students how to determine what fake news is has no place in our schools. During Martin Luther King Week, 7th graders were taught about the intolerable history of discrimination in America, the timeliness of Black Lives Matters, spotlighting the murder of George Floyd, and how it all ties back to the introduction of slavery in America in 1619. White privilege stresses that America is irreversibly racist because of our history in slavery. Divisiveness is being taught in our schools, and it's a clear violation of our state statutes 15-102, 112, and 113. The civil rights movement is a celebration of the advancement of civil rights in our country. Isolating ethnic groups, victimizing them, promoting white guilt, berating all law enforcement, while Black Lives Matter riots across the country chanting, "Pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon," is not okay. It seems that education in the 3 R's has taken a back seat to indoctrination. If this is allowed to continue in our schools, you can rest assured that student enrollment will continue to decline from the public school system. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Busan. Next public comment comes from Ms. Trina Berg.
Good evening, President Sandoval, members of the board. My name is Trina Berg. I'm president of the Peoria Education Association. I'm here tonight in support of our teachers who showed the inauguration on Inauguration Day to their classes. We hear a lot that we should be teaching history, and that was a historical day. Every inauguration is a historical day, so I'm not really sure what the issue is. Some teachers had the poem that was read at the inauguration also presented in their classroom. That was like set on TV. It was during the inauguration. It was a wonderful poem. Also, it was a female student who's overcome a speech impediment, and that is a wonderful lesson for our kids to learn, that they can overcome diversity, they can overcome setbacks, they can overcome disabilities, and then end up on national TV reading this wonderful poem at an inauguration. Why was this inauguration historical? We have the first female vice president of the United States. We have the first woman of color vice president of the United States. We have a family who is a blended family, like most of our students, and an interracial blended family. These are amazing things, and they should be celebrated. And this community that we serve in our district is incredibly diverse. And discussions of Black Lives Matter and things like that, it's historical. Our students saw it on TV. It needs to be discussed. We have the ability to discuss things without taking sides. I don't understand. We need to teach history, but then we do, and then we're vilified for it. We are indoctrinating our kids, but you want us in school, and we're essential, and how dare us all call in sick, which I have a legal right to do. You want history taught, but you want it taught the way you want it. You want us here to support the social emotional needs of your students, but apparently you want it done your way. We're a public school system, and we have to service all of our children. We have to keep that in mind, that all of our children come from very different backgrounds. We have to continuously try and support all of the students that we serve in this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bird. Our next public comment comes from Ms. Janet Manley.
Okay, hope I don't mess this up. It's my first meeting like this. I wanted to come today because I did have a concern, but first, before I go into my concern, I wanted to say that I've lived all over the valley as a youth, as a single, and Peoria has been my favorite city. I feel like it's been run the best out of all the cities I live in. Now that I buttered you up, I'll give you my comment. No, but seriously, I really do love this city. And I came because I was concerned that I don't know exactly what's being taught. I see so many young people out there doing things that most of us would consider horrendous. You know, you see that on television. A lot of the it seems like it's happening in educational institutions that kids are getting these ideas that are blossoming into inappropriate actions. I have an 9-year-old son, and I'm just going to say that when he was 8, he was targeted at his after-school program for racism. And I apologize for bringing that up. I feel like I have to apologize for everything when it comes to this topic. I recently graduated in broadcast, and I absolutely love people, and that's why I picked broadcast as my degree, is because I have a big heart for people, and I love how you can shine a light on something bad that's happening in the world and take action to do something good. And I was disappointed that my son, he was pointing out that some parents were there to pick up their kid. And he said, "Hey, black kid, your parents are here to get you." And those parents and that kid, they targeted my son and tried to have him written up. He was 8 years old. I haven't taught my son that that's a dirty word, you know, because it's not. My son actually has a black grandmother. He has a black father. And it was really, it was very upsetting to me, and I was concerned. I do believe that we should teach about fact-checking and broadcast in school. I think fact-checking curriculum is essential. I think the way that you get your information has changed dramatically over the last decade, and I don't think that the general public has the tools to really properly fact-check. It's a huge motivation of mine, but I am concerned about Black Lives Matter and how it is taught in schools, because I am concerned about some of the things that they seem to support. And I don't think that we should, I think we should be very careful teaching things until they are vetted.
Ms. Manley,
yeah.
sorry. It's time.
Okay.
Thank you. Next public comment comes from Ms. Robin. I'm going to say Hafey. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Robin Hafey. I was a former teacher. I'm a mom and a nana. And I'm distressed that teachers who are holding different opinions are being harassed and are having their jobs threatened because they think differently. This is intimidation and it's censorship, and we're seeing it in the big picture in our country, but we're also seeing it within the school system. And it's very distressing. I think these are tactics that are used in communist countries. Many years ago, our nation's founders fled the country that told them what to think and say. So they made our First Amendment a cornerstone. We are given the right to free speech. I grew up in a place where we considered it's a free country, we used to always say. You can't tell me, it's a free country. But I'm really beginning to wonder. The public school system is distorting and undermining this right in the name of what's somebody's determination of what's politically correct. Children are not being taught to think, to discuss, to persuade, and that is really dangerous. Please stop the harassment and threats of being fired. Have respect for teachers' and students' opinions, not coercion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hafey. Next public comment comes from Mr. Mark Del Mastro.
Good evening. My name is Mark Del Maestro. I'm a combat Vietnam veteran. But more than that, I am an American patriot. But even more than that, I believe in God, and I'm not ashamed or afraid to say it loud and clear. I believe in God. God chooses the color of our skin, and God chooses if we're a man or a woman. And God chooses our parents and our brothers and our sisters, and God chooses the nation we are born in. And I don't judge God's choices. It makes no sense to me. I judge people about what we choose for ourselves. We choose to lie, cheat, steal, or do we choose to be kind, compassionate, and seek the truth? It saddens me that you can't share that statement with your students because the race card's far, far, far more important. It really saddens me. A simple sentence can change their thinking and their position and their purpose in their life and how they treat each other. Just a simple sentence. God chooses the color of our skin, and I don't judge God's choices. Why would that be so hard? Because race card is more important? I think you need to change the narrative. I think you have the power and the position to do so. Please use it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Del Maestro. Next public comment comes from Miss Amy, looks like Sura.
Okay. Good evening, board members, superintendent, parents, and teachers. My name is Amy Souza, and I'm the proud mom of a 7th grader and 4th grader at Sunset Heights Elementary. My husband and I have always been strong supporters of the teachers and the Peoria school system as a whole. On Friday, January 8, 2021, I was made aware of a plan among some teachers in our district to plan a sick-out day on Monday the 11th. I immediately wrote emails to each of my children's teachers expressing my displeasure and asking them that they not participate. On Monday, I was made aware that one of my daughter's 7th grade teachers was at the school to drop off paperwork in the morning to the substitute and left before the first bell. Wanting to give this teacher the benefit of the doubt, I emailed him once again and asked if he had participated. I heard nothing from the teacher, but received a phone call from Ray Connolly, the principal at Sunset Heights, asking me if I had written this letter, to which I said, "You bet I did." To which she replied that I had no right to ask this teacher that question. I have every right to ask questions about the people who are entrusted to teach my children, as is written in the Peoria Unified School District's Parental Rights, Section 1-601, Paragraph A, which states the liberty of parents to direct the upbringing, education, healthcare, and mental health of their children is a fundamental right. And further goes on in Section 1-602, Paragraph A, to define the Parents' Bill of Rights as all parental rights are reserved to a parent of a minor child without obstruction or interference. Last week, I was made aware that my daughter's 7th grade social studies teacher had put a timeline on the whiteboard depicting a history of discrimination, which included such historical civil rights figures as Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., and then there was, in 2013, Black Lives Matter, and in 2020, George Floyd protests. So Black Lives Matter. if everybody was to pull out their phones and look up blacklivesmatter.com and decide you wanted to donate to their cause, it takes you to a site called secure.actblue.com. When you look that site up, it takes you to a fundraising website that boasts, as of today, 13,642,290 Democratic donors and powering Democratic candidates, committees, parties, organizations, and C4s around the country. Why is anyone other than myself or my husband talking to our kids about a controversial, violent, terrorist, partisan group like Black Lives Matter? Why? Now George Floyd protests. George Floyd was a convicted criminal who admitted to breaking into a woman's home to rob her while holding a gun to her abdomen. Aggravated robbery with a deadly weapon for which he served 5 years in prison. At the time of Floyd's autopsy, his toxicology report showed significant levels of fentanyl and methamphetamines in his system, and there is still controversy as to the actual cause of his death. Why, on God's green...
Ms. Souza, time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next public comment comes from Rhett Penn.
I look at all this green, blue, and red, and I think of Christmas, but unfortunately it feels like that's not the case. I had something prepared, but in light of recent comments, I just wanted to say a few things. First off, my name is Rhett Penn. I am an educator in this district. I have been for 8 years of my 10 years as a teacher. I love this district, and I love the people in it. I love my students. Every one of them, no question. I was raised by my mother, who was a school teacher, and my father, who was a Vietnam veteran, Marine Corps. My father, having been struck by his dad, my grandfather, because he drank from a colored fountain in Texas at the age of 4. This is not long ago. Martin Luther King could have been alive today had history not happened the way it did. And for people to talk about it like it's ancient history, this makes me sad. Secondly, I am a parent. I have a 4-year-old girl that I cannot wait to put into this district. And I have a 2-month-old son, well, 3-month-old son. My 4-year-old got COVID from babysitting. We got it all. We had our moment of suffering. We recovered, if not by the grace of God. I do not know if there was going to be any impacting lasting damage. I read stories of children who recover and then die from complications suffered after. Secondly, this is a public forum where we can have the privilege to speak to our board and our superintendent. These people take time out of their very busy lives to make sure that our funds are directed in a proper way and that actions can be taken. And in this year, it is overwhelming. I hope we are empathetic enough to know that. I hope we have the empathy to look at the people across this room. Parents, I look at you, I understand your anger. But I hope that you're also opening lines of communication to your children, to communicate with them the best you can in this world we live in. And to those, oh man. I'm sorry, just not enough time to address all of the things, but long story short, my family recovered from COVID, and unfortunately the numbers are getting worse. And I work in a school that, as of right now, 44% of our students are at home quarantining because of the cases that are rampantly raging, and I do not see any actions taken from the new metrics that have been installed. You keep telling me that you hear us, and you keep telling me that there's actions. I trust you. I hope that they come. Lastly, can we actually, if we talk of love, actually show it? I too believe in God, and I love his son, Jesus Christ, but I will not forget the fact that his death was brought upon us by politicians seeking to please an angry crowd.
Time.
Thank you, Mr. Penn. Next public comment is from Ms. Amy Lemons.
Amy Lemons, parent, first of all, of 2 kids at Copperwood, teacher, second, high school teacher at Ironwood, and then community member, which is what I'm going to speak on today. I wasn't planning to speak, but given the circumstances, I felt it was best if we could hear a little bit of both sides of the story and know that your community is not just some of the comments that you hear each of these days. Also, I want to just mention that it took a lot of guts for Trina to come and speak after being spoken about, and I'm not sure about the legalities of anything. However, I will mention that we don't go into other people's workplaces and demand their removal, and so it would be nice to have a little bit of grace there. All right. On the point of the inauguration, literally watching the inauguration is teaching the Constitution in real time. I remember as a Peoria student 20 years ago, watching every inauguration that there was possible. I have not missed one since, even when it was candidates that I did not vote for, because that is the Constitution in practice. This is what America is founded on. And to be upset or not want your child to see that is not a position that I can even begin to understand, I suppose. And I do think that taking that opportunity away from kids would be a shame. And if for some reason your child came home with something that you did not agree with, then a simple conversation at home could remedy that. I don't know, I just put a bunch of notes here. How about masks? We still have people in the room without masks on. That's kind of ridiculous. And we still teach all day long with them on, and I don't understand why this is still happening. My own children have been in school now for however many years it is to be a 7th grader and a 5th grader, and they've been taught by Republicans and they've been taught by Democrats, and none of the teachers, whatever side they may fall on, has ever covered one of the topics inappropriately. And I think that if you just trust your teachers, because we are in a public school system, that we would be a lot better off instead of being ridiculed and demanded to teach or believe and indoctrinate in a specific way, apparently. And also, FERPA does allow us not to explain why we're sick to the common community. We have that right to understand why we might need a day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lemons. Next public comment comes from Ms. Becky Smith.
Hi, thank you. I don't really know where to begin. There's so many controversial issues right now, which is sad. I think it's sad for our kids. Our kids are feeling it the worst. They're stressed, they're depressed. I'm seeing it in my own kids, but I'm going to try to hit on everything really quick. As far as masks go, I did send an email to the whole board, and I had no response from that. But if you look at the Maricopa County mask mandate that we are currently being masked under, it states on there the study that this mandate came from, and go to that study. I urge everybody to go to that study and read the study that this mandate is based on, and it says, a trial we conducted in Vietnam of 2-layered cotton cloth masks compared to medical masks showed a lower rate of infection in the medical mask group and a 13 times higher risk of infection in cloth mask arm. The study suggests cloth masks may increase the risk of infection. So we have kids running around schools, and everybody knows, I had kids when I taught schools that came with dirty clothes. They came to school with dirty clothes because their clothes weren't getting washed by their parents. So you have to wonder, are masks being washed? So that's my take on why I think the more we're masked, the higher our numbers are going, because we're all walking around with dirty masks. We're all cross-contaminating with masks. I see it every day. I had somebody touch a mask today with their dirty hands and try to make me wear it. And I said, no, thank you. I'm not wearing a mask that you just touched with your dirty hands. The general public are not medical professionals. They don't know how to not cross-contaminate. I'm not one either, but it's common sense. You don't put your hands on someone's mask and then make them wear it. My daughter was given a mask out of someone's purse and told to wear it when they were dealing with her. So I just feel like the common public doesn't understand cross-contamination. Chemicals in our school is not being addressed. The Clorox 360 machine and other harsh chemicals, no one really looks into that. There's a scientist, James Lyons, and he said it showed 50% reduction rate in both male and female mice being able to reproduce after being exposed to these type of chemicals. They're called QUATs, Q-U-A-T-S. They're very damaging. We're poisoning our kids. We don't know the long-term effects of them being exposed to these mass chemicals spread all over our schools, that they may actually have infertility issues later. They may have cancers. No one's questioning those things. I know the vaccine's controversial. I don't feel like anybody should be pressured. I know the district is strongly urging people, giving incentives, making it seem like you're a hero if you do that. That should be a personal decision, and the professionals are currently even admitting they don't know the long-term effects. They don't know the health long-term effects. They don't know how long it's even going to protect you, and it doesn't stop you from getting the virus. They've admitted that. You're going to still get it. You're just going to get, less severe reaction. So we're pushing all these things on people that should be their own personal decisions. That's just how I feel. There's doctors that say they don't recommend it for anybody under the age of 70 with a clean bill of health. It's only for people over 70.
Ms. Smith. Thank you. Next public comment comes from Mr. Greg Moats.
My name is Greg Moats, and I'm a resident of the city of Peoria. I have a grandson who's soon to be attending schools here in Peoria, or maybe not. I'm greatly distressed by what I hear about Black Lives Matter being put forth in the classroom, when Black Lives Matter is really nothing more than a terrorist group. Here's a fact that I would have been happy that they taught in the class, is that an 11-year FBI study showed that in I believe it was 540 police murders, the assailant in those cases, 40% of the time were black people, and almost all of them were black males. So we're talking about 7% of the population being responsible for 40% of the police murders during that 11-year period. I'm disgusted with Black Lives Matter, and I'm disturbed that all of you don't appear to be disturbed by it, because I haven't heard anything from y'all. The other thing that bothers me about Peoria and the other school districts is that y'all apparently allow teachers to organize Red for Ed using school district computers and allow them to wear materials around the school. That's totally unacceptable. I could go on, but everybody else here has pretty much echoed my other feelings, so I'm going to end it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moats. Next public comment comes from Mr. Glenn Forbes.
Do you all answer questions in this time? No? Okay. So I don't know who you all serve. And that's an honest question, I really don't. I don't know if you serve the students, the teachers, taxpayers. I don't know whose interests you all are serving. Hopefully, obviously, students fall into there somewhere. I want to talk about the teachers' strike. We got an email from someone at our school, principal or administrator or somebody after that, saying, good news, teachers are coming back, and you get to go back to class now, and we'll be staffed, and everything's great, and thanks for your patience and all of your understanding. And I just found that email just disgusting, and I couldn't, not until this morning, could I really figure out how to define that email. How do I qualify that? And this morning I figured it was just enraging. Enraging. There's no understanding. There's no more patience. You know, I see my high school kids when we're doing the online teaching, and, you know, there's certainly a place for that. But when online teaching is the kids wake up in bed 30 seconds before school starts, turn their computer on, they have, out of an hour and 15 or 20-minute class, there's a 20-minute session there, and then it's, all right, do whatever. Their work is done 10 minutes later, and then they're doing nothing. There's no interaction, there's no education. There's nothing being done for these students for half the class at least. And you strike at a time when the AIA is shutting down sports. God, give these kids their lives back. Come on. And then I go to a basketball game and these kids are going up and down the court in a mask. Come on, that can't be good for them. What's worse is not playing sports, sitting at home on a video game, eating Cheetos. That's not healthy. If you serve the kids, do something to serve the kids. Let's get more substitutes. If they want to strike, let them strike. Let's get substitutes in there. Let's do something to prevent this from happening. Let's serve the students, please. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Forbes. And we have time for two more. Next public comment is from Ms. Courtney Clausen.
Good evening, governing board members and guests. Last year, my child, a PUSD student, brought home a form asking for a donation for what I believe to be a biased, one-sided, divisive weekly magazine. This donation would provide a personal copy for each student. The form also stated that this cross-curricular magazine can help students build nonfiction reading skills, increase content area knowledge, and inspire of a love of learning. I emailed the teacher to ask if this magazine was mandatory. The teacher replied, and I quote, "Well, all fourth grade classes are using this for informative text opportunities. All kids will be using them. If we don't get the donation, we just look for other means to get the money." Why is there material being taught to our children that PUSD board knows nothing about, nor do we the parents? Asking for curriculum is like pulling teeth. For some reason, it is very difficult to meet with the teachers and actually get that content. To me, that's a very serious problem because I think I still have rights as a parent to review this information. Is that correct? So, as I stand here today, I'm very frustrated, and I'm supporting a lot of parents in my neighborhood as well, who when I showed them this material, they were shocked. So as the gentleman before said, I really hope somebody starts helping our children and the parents too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clausen. And our final public comment comes from Ms. Nikki Coletti.
Hi, good evening. I'll be parroting most of what was already said here tonight, but let me go through this really quickly. I do think that there should be action taken against those who organized the sick out on 1/11, which by using the school resources was against all PUSD schools policies encouraged by the teachers union. The scout it's my understanding that it was because the teachers felt the county metrics for COVID were not followed. But I read the metrics right before I came to this meeting tonight, and not a single campus has an infection rate more than 0.91%, and most are significantly lower than that. In fact, the majority are significantly lower than that. And it's been shown time and time again how classes are not spread centers, and this fear-mongering that's going on is crazy. The Maricopa numbers are different than school districts, and you would think educators would utilize the fact that science should be driving their decisions instead of this mob mentality. The organizers of the sick out have to be called out and terminated because it was a violation of PUSD policy. If this is overlooked, they'll never stop using school resources to the detriment of students. Parents and teachers are feeling like their voices aren't being heard. And as Ms. Berg mentioned, yes, teachers do have sick days, and they can use them for the designated appropriate purpose if they're sick. This was not that. This was a bargaining tactic to get leverage against the school board for continuing to have open classes. That was already talked about. As far as the inauguration, I understand that it's an educational tool, and for President Obama's inauguration, they needed permission slips. And I guess they didn't need them for President Biden's. My question is, did they show President Trump's? Yeah. So to me, it's not an educational thing, it's just a bias thing. So back to what's being taught in the classroom. I saw a photo from a 7th grade class at Sunset Heights. The name of the timeline was called a History of Discrimination that goes all the way through 2020. First of all, that name implies that we've had no progress in our history. Some of the events in that timeline were not discriminatory at all.
Time, Ms. Coletti. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Once again, thank you, everybody, for your time this evening. Ms. Contra, I do have, about 6 public comments that were not read. I'm not sure how you want to proceed with getting in contact with them to make sure that we, as a board, receive the comments that they were going to read this evening. I'm not sure if they have some phone numbers on here, but I mean, if we can make every effort to make sure that we reach out to these individuals. So I'm going to keep these face up. Those need to be, okay. Moving on to no items were removed from the consent agenda. Moving on to section 8, action items, 8.1, discussion and consideration of approval of contract language for administrative, certificated teachers, certificated non-teaching professionals, and support staff for the 2021-2022 school year.
All right, good evening, President Sandoval, members of the board, Dr. Reynolds. And tonight I come and stand before you to ask for your approval of the contract language. The approval of the contract language for both certified staff members, administrators, and our classified team members will allow us to keep the hiring process moving forward as we consider the needs for next school year. As you look at those few attachments, you will see that there is very minimal change to the contract and lower language that was approved last year. We did add a statement, a couple of statements regarding the approval of salary as well as the approval of the start date of the contracts, knowing that we have some decisions that need to be made with our budget team and then brought forward to you. So simply tonight, I do ask for your approval of that language. Again, knowing that there will be some considerations for possible changes as we move into the springtime. Certainly, I'll stand here for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Davidson. Board members, questions, comments? Ms. Hill?
No questions at this time.
Dr. Sorensen?
I have a couple of questions. Can you kind of give us an update on where we are in our compensation committee and kind of making some decisions regarding what contracts will look like or potentially look like?
Sure, thank you, President Sandoval, Dr. Sorensen. What we know and the reason for the request in the contract language on pending governing board approval on the date itself, if you recall, over the last probably 3 years, for certified staff members who serve as truly classroom instructors, Function 1000 code, the budget team had approved a few years back to give an additional day for teachers to come and set up their classrooms. We have found that that day is a conversation piece in our budget team, and that the budget team, at least last year, recommended to the board and to us as administrators that that day become contractual in nature. So we want to finalize that conversation in our budget team process. That budget team meets on Monday of this coming week, which will certainly be an ongoing team led by Ms. Myers and myself to bring back to the board a variety of items for your approval at some point. And Dr. Sorensen, let me just, that was, I don't know exactly, I'm going to speak a little bit to also our compensation 2.0. We are still in process working with the company EMS. That's helping us with job descriptions, our salary classifications across all of our platforms here in the district. And they'll be giving recommendations to us as well that eventually you'll be seeing some of those at some point as to how we should move forward, really trying to maximize resources on behalf of our employees. So that is a process that's been in place this year, and certainly we look forward to bringing you some items in the future.
You know this much better than I do, so I'm sorry if I'm not asking specific enough questions, and if they're not related to this, then it can be discussed another time. Do we have an idea, like a guess on when our staff would know what kind of percent salary increase that they would receive for the next year?
Dr. Sorensen, certainly that's a great question, and it isn't quite related to this item, and if you're okay, I'd probably ask if we hold on that. I do believe, as I shared, our budget team will be bringing those types of pieces of information to the board in the very near future.
And Dr. Davison, President Sandoval, Dr. Sorensen, we have a budget process update later this evening, and I'll be speaking to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Will that also kind of talk about if we think health insurance increases will impact our staff?
President Sandoval, Dr. Sorensen, members of the governing board tonight will be walking through the general process, and there are periodic updates throughout the spring, and I'll speak to that in detail shortly. Thank you.
Awesome, and I'm sorry, one more question. This is kind of specific, so again, I apologize. I'm new here. Do you know how many of our assistant principals who are properly certified are on a TOA, teacher's pay scale? And I understand we add days and do those kinds of things. Do we have an idea on that? Because that does not feel equitable to me. If we have assistant principals who are properly certified, have their masters, have gone through certifications, and are on a TOA pay scale.
Sir, thank you, Dr. Sorensen, and good question. Just due to point of order, if you're okay, I'd like to follow up with that perhaps in a Friday report, and we could send all that information to our governing board members.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sorensen. Ms. Underhill?
I just had one question. I know that our liquidated damages is on hold. We've pushed that through. I just know that that's still listed in the contract, but I believe that this is just the language, right? So if things change with that, we could still make that change. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Thank you, Ms. Underhill. Ms. Pingerelli?
No questions.
Thank you, Ms. Pingerelli. Yeah, I do have questions similar in the lane of Dr. Sorensen's, but I know, Ms. Myers, you'll be speaking to a budget in a subsequent line item. So that said, I don't have any questions for this specific line item. So I do need if no further questions or comments, I do need a motion to approve 8.1.
I motion to approve 8.1, consideration of contract language.
I'll second that. Ms. Contra, we have a motion by Dr. Sorensen and a second by myself. Board members, please cast your votes. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, board members.
Thank you.
Dr. Davidson, thank you, sir. Moving on to discussion items, section 9.1, health data update. Mr. Moss.
President Sandoval, members of the governing board, I'm here tonight to give you a little bit of an update on some health data that we've been following. As we've done in the past, we need to kind of get an update of where, let me see how to do this. Right here, here we go. As we remember from what we've talked about in the past, and these are old numbers, so I don't get too excited about what's there. There are 3 benchmarks that were developed by the county, right? That they developed for us that were kind of identifiers of spread of COVID throughout our community. The first one there is cases, and that actually means the number of cases per 100,000 people within our school district. These are this is our numbers that match specifically with our attendance areas within our district. The percent positive is the percentage of positive tests that are done during usually a 1-week time period, and what percentage of those tests come back with a positive result. The COVID-like illness column is the number of people, or the percentage of people who show up in hospitals with COVID-like illness. Could be flu, could be COVID, but it tends the hospitals report to us that, or report to the county, that this is the percentage of people who have COVID-like illness when they come into their emergency rooms or admitted or whatever the case is, however they track that information. This information is usually about, or is, 10 to 13 days old. And so when we get the information for today, for example, we're going to have an update today that we actually got information this morning. It's actually information from the week of January the 16th. And so we're about 8 or 10, 12 days behind because it takes them that long to calculate the data and collect the data from the hospitals and from the tests. Okay? So I left for you 369 on that information on December the 10th because that was the last time that we had a formal update like this, and we talked about what the numbers were doing. You can see that those were essentially pretty, in the areas that we talked about, those had been increasing for the semester. There was also lots of information about a bubble that was coming with the travel and what was happening with Christmas time and people interacting with families and those kind of things. And so as we followed the numbers there, you can see that the number of cases have increased, that the percentage positive increased, and the COVID-like illness increased across each of those things. We really got the jump after Christmas break, after Christmas holidays. You can see that those numbers skyrocketed again, 940, 1,019. The positive rate went up, just like it was predicted that we were going to get an increase. I'm here to tell you for the first time in a long time, the numbers are declining. You can see there that we've gone from 1,019 down to 775. Our percent positive is declining. Our COVID-like illness in the hospitals is declining also. And so this is the first time in probably 2 months that we've had any kind of decline in these numbers in this process in particular. Okay? The good news and probably the better news in this process for our community is from this graph right here. This graph, first of all, each of those lines represents a single day reported cases within Maricopa County. And the dotted line, the black dotted line that travels along there, is the rolling average of 7 days of reported cases. So as you follow that line along, you can see that when we start looking at our 1,019 score, for example, we got it 13 days after January 9th, so that would have been our January 21st number. You can see the 775, and I show you this graph because it's 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 days behind, you can kind of see where we're going. And so I'm here to try to tell you a little bit by following that graph out. I believe that next week we'll have a decline again in our numbers as we go for the future. Now, this information, as we show you, does a good job of telling you what's happening around the whole community, what's happening all around our schools. As we've been talking about in our study session and those kind of things, we wanted to develop a process for trying to figure out what was happening within our schools. And so I think that Dr. Reynolds is going to walk you through, I think, this process that we've developed.
Thank you for that, Mr. Moss. Appreciate the update. Governing Board, President Sandoval, Cabinet, guests. Tonight we're bringing forward the results of the request that this board made back in December to add some school metrics to our statewide Arizona County benchmarks. And so at the last meeting, we brought to you, I spoke with you about the county factors that they use, and we're going to use that as a foundation to build on. Since then, I have talked with students, teachers, principals, parent leaderships, members of our medical advisory, and others to get their feedback on those factors and some numbers around those. And we've had several iterations of that from the last time we met until today, and we're bringing to you our infographic that helps our community walk through, teachers and our parents and staff, administrators walk through how we will continue to work to determine the viability of our in-person learning option. So when you look at our infographic, you've got a hard copy in front of you because I know it might be a little difficult to read up on the screen. We have two major areas, and I've talked with our stakeholder advisor, I talked with our superintendent student advisory about how we organize those two groups of data. So we have health data, and we also have operational data on that infographic. And when you look at the health data, we organize that using the absenteeism rate. That's what we talked about last time that our county asked us to track. We look at a positivity rate. That's the percentage of students, staff in a school who have tested positive. And we also use the county outbreak data that when the county communicates to us that we have an outbreak within a school, if we have multiple clusters, if we have more than one cluster in a school, that also is a factor that we are using. Then we have the operational data. What I mean by operational is it is impacted by the health of our students and staff. However, it really is there to determine whether or not we can operationally provide an outstanding learning environment, in-person learning environment. For instance, we have set that number based on feedback at 10% of our staff. If 10% of a staff in a school is out sick, then we need to jump in and look. If 25% of our students are out of the school, then we would invoke this process. So let's talk about what that process looks like. If any school hits any of these thresholds, the principal, the leadership team at that school works with our COVID response team, and they start diving deeper into that data and figure out what is the most appropriate way to move forward. So that could be additional mitigation strategies, that could be continuing to monitor, that could be needing to close a classroom to in-person learning, it could be a grade level, it could be the entire school. So we will use this framework to continue to monitor where we are. Over the past week, we have asked schools to work with us and walk through this process. So we've had, I think, 7 schools, and I think that's the next slide. We've had 7 schools that we asked to walk through this process with us. Now, of those schools, not all of them hit these thresholds. In fact, I think only one hit one of these thresholds. But we asked some schools just to walk through it with us. And I want to thank those schools, those principals, because it was extra work, but they wanted to do it. They participated because they wanted to provide feedback. They wanted to let us know what is working, where we can improve, and so that was a really valuable experience. I sat in on every one of those calls to watch the process, make sure that I was comfortable with it. And I have to tell you again, I know we talk about the CRT. I know we talk about all the work that our leadership teams and our teachers are doing, our nurses, but to watch the level of detail that our site leadership team goes through to make sure that their data is accurate, to make sure that that we are using this mitigation strategy in the most effective way, most appropriate way, it's impressive. And you should know that they're working just incredibly hard, and sitting on those calls was a valuable experience for me. So if we hit any of those thresholds, right, as we walk through this, our schools will reach out, a principal can reach out, a leadership team can reach out. It could be the COVID response team who reaches out to the school if they see something. I use an example of, as Dr. Davidson continues to monitor staff absenteeism through his office, there might be an opportunity, right, for Dr. Davidson to reach out and say, hey, I see we're getting close to that 10% number. Let's talk about absenteeism for staff. Let's talk about what that looks like for you. And the principal and the team get to come together and really walk through that. And so this is an important process. It is an accurate process that I believe will be the most effective way for us to be able to utilize our school data. It's important to note that as we talk about some of these factors, a lot of these are school-level data sets. So our schools are working on those and keeping track of those. And we're asking principals and their teams to be monitoring those on a daily basis, so they can see where each of their schools is in relationship to these areas. And of course, on that schematic, or I'm sorry, on that infographic, you also have the social emotional, we've got the community spread, and then of course, the process that our schools will follow along with our CRT to make that determination. Before we jump into any questions, I'd like Ms. Airy to give us an update on vaccinations in our community and the process we're using to help get vaccinations in our school district.
Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. Good evening, President Sandoval, members of the board, cabinet, and guests that have joined us. It's great to be here to give you an update on the vaccinations and to follow Mr. Moss's encouraging news on our data. As we have shared with you for the last 2.5 weeks, Maricopa County has been offering vaccines to 1B, those in education or who work in a child care setting. Since then, we have been providing as much information as possible to our staff in hopes they will explore and consider getting that vaccine. While we can't require them to disclose if they have an appointment, if they've already received it, or if they are planning to get the vaccine, we did ask them to voluntarily share with us if that is something that is on their radar for consideration, if maybe they have already signed up or already received it. So that's the information that you're looking at in front of you here on the screen, the results of the survey. We continue to share that with our staff and say, please help give us feedback. This is important to us, not only to have kind of a pulse on where our staff is at with regard to the vaccine, but also as we are planning for our own closed pod site, and I'll talk more about that here in just a moment. But as you can see, we have just about 450 members of our staff who are saying they either will get the vaccine or are looking forward to getting the vaccine, rather. And then you can see there the number that have that scheduled and the number that do not have that scheduled yet. So again, we just keep encouraging them with the information that we receive from the county. I'll move along here then to update you because in the meantime, we've confirmed the details on our closed point of distribution, or pod, as you heard me reference it, site, and we're really excited to have that at Liberty High School in partnership with Fry's Pharmacy. You should know that is being provided to us free of charge by Maricopa County Department of Public Health. So we are partners with both Fry's and the county in that process. We did have an initial kickoff meeting with them, and under Mr. Duguid's leadership, we'll be moving forward with all the logistics that will go into coordinating that event. It is the Moderna vaccine, and it is the first dose that will be held on that date. We will then follow up because it is recommended to provide a second dose 28 days later of the Moderna vaccine that is slightly different from the Pfizer vaccine. So we will host a second event as well to offer that second vaccination, complete the vaccination process in March. So we'll be sharing this with our staff as well as the link for them to sign up. You do have to have an appointment. And I think it is important to note that it is not just for Peoria Unified staff. We'll be receiving about 3,300 doses of vaccine, and those are open to others in our community. So we are proud to be welcoming our charter schools and private schools in our community to come to our school and to receive what they need to continue to provide support back to our community. So we will share more with our staff once we have it and keep providing those updates.
Thank you, Mrs. Airy. Lastly, before we start to get into questions, just want to again reiterate that this is a fluid process, and we're going to continue to monitor and adjust. I use the examples of the trial runs that we went through with 7 of our schools and how valuable that was, as well as the feedback. So and I also mentioned several iterations. So we started 2 weeks ago and with one set of numbers, and using the feedback, the valuable feedback from our teachers, using the valuable feedback from our principals, we adjusted those numbers prior to running through our trials and then running through the trials, getting that feedback. But we'll continue to monitor and adjust and make sure that the tool we're using is the most appropriate one to determine that appropriateness of in-person learning.
Thank you, Dr. Reynolds, Mr. Moss, Ms. Airy. Board members, questions, comments? Ms. Hill?
I guess I just have one question for you. I was actually wondering, one of the things that was mentioned was that people might have COVID-like symptoms. And I just wanted clarification on COVID-like. Does that mean that it's not necessarily COVID, but maybe some of the symptoms of COVID? So I just wanted a little clarification. That
President Sandoval, Ms. Hill, yes, exactly. And that's the hospitals are making that determination, and I believe they've worked with the county to decide, is it flu, is it COVID, so it's somewhat to their discretion to determine if it's COVID symptoms, lose taste, lose smell, is it more flu-like, is it the respiratory problems. I think they make those determinations, and I think they've worked with the county and the hospital to determine what they're going to report and what they should report and what they shouldn't report.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Dr. Sorensen?
What was the approximate percentage of staff that have filled out that survey?
Thank you, President Sandoval, Dr. Sorensen. We had approaching 500, and we have roughly 4,000 employees in the Peoria Unified School District.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Underhill?
I just wanted to make sure, I'm assuming that the surveys are anonymous, correct?
President Sandoval, Mrs. Underhill, yes.
Okay, I figured. Also, I had a question on just staff coverage. Are we finding that we're able to get, classes covered, substitutes and that kind of thing? If I could just ask for a little update on that.
President Sandoval, Ms. Underhill, the last week has been excellent. I think today we're right around 83% of our needed classrooms filled. So certainly that's not 100%. I do believe with us being open and with us having that board improved increase, that certainly has helped, so thank you. But for any of those schools that don't have a high fill rate, as Dr. Reynolds said, it's very important, and we do often check with them, and I'll tell you, our schools are doing a magnificent job in making certain our classrooms are covered and getting that support, so thank you.
And Dr. Davidson, I'll just add that, you know, when we see a high number like 83%, that is, that's good. But we never want to forget that that is not 100%. And so there is a stress on our teachers and our staff as they work to cover classrooms and do their jobs as well. So.
And then I just had another question, and this seems probably obvious, but the absenteeism, when it says 10% of in-person students are absent due to COVID-like illness school-wide, that includes quarantine kids? I mean, that's all inclusive? Or?
So you'll notice, thank you for that question, Mrs. Underhill. So you notice that there are two absenteeism numbers. The 10%, that is students who are out of school with COVID-like symptoms. The 25%, right, that's that operational piece. That's that are too many kids being quarantined or too many kids away from school and making it really, really challenging to deliver that in-person instruction. So that 25% includes quarantine. It includes students out for really any reason.
Okay, that's great. And I did really appreciate that kind of distribution between the health and the operations piece because they obviously go hand in hand. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Underhill. Ms. Pingerelli?
No questions. I just wanted to say thank you for the additional framework.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Dr. Reynolds and team, a few questions that I have are, one, first and foremost, and this may be for Ms. Airy. You know, being that we're a large district, fourth largest, right, in our state, are there thoughts in and around, obviously there's a lot going on, very fluid, right, for the, obviously the vaccinations and how they come in even from a national level and local. But are there any discussions in and around how we can maybe increase, you know, a pod location that's a little more centralized, that makes it a little more easy for, you know, our all employee groups to you know, get through those lines fluidly?
President Sandoval, thank you for that question. Yes, we have been advocating everywhere and anywhere that we can to anyone that will listen that we are looking forward to hosting, that we would host additional events. We continue to follow up as there are many that send us maybe a contact for anyone who has a private practice that is looking to distribute. So we have those open lines of communication. We also continue to follow up through Dr. Scott, who is with the county and is a critical member of the team at the county that is working through this, you know, working on our medical advisory and working with the county and us. So anywhere that we can secure additional vaccines, we would be looking to do so. This is what we hope is the first step.
Sure.
President Sandoval, if I can just jump in as well.
Sure.
Thank you for that. And Ms. Airy does a wonderful job complimenting and being thankful of our partnerships, because we are very thankful to be able to host a closed pod. I think it's important for the board to know and our community to understand that when we say free of charge, the vaccinations come to us that way. It'll be our staff, it'll be our equipment, it'll be our dollars that is going to hosting that closed pod, which we're happy to do. But it is a significant undertaking, and a lot of our people will be working very hard to get that set up and implemented.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you for that. And this next question, it might be a collaboration between Ms. Airy and Mr. Moss. You know, we use the term, you know, fluid, and we've used it throughout this entire time. As we, you know, have those discussions and understand the fluidity of what we're going through, how are we adapting, you know, our communications, meaning more specifically, you know, one of our main touch points, our website, right, and how that becomes fluid with the information as it comes in, meaning, you know, like our current framework, right? Ensuring that when an individual goes to our, let's say, our COVID-19 plan, you know, now it's been updated a few times, how that's reflected on our site. I mean, can you just talk about that process? And I haven't, and I'm going to preface this by saying I have not looked at the site, so I should have before asking this question, so I apologize. But I just want to understand how that particular communication channel is in an alignment, with the shift that we're going through as a district.
President Sandoval, thank you for that question as well. We have a team that works very hard on our website to make sure it is being updated as frequently as possible. I've shared with the board some additional updates that were on our COVID-19 dashboard, as well as our return to school page that we are always reviewing as well. This framework hasn't made its way to that site just yet because we certainly were looking forward to sharing that with you all first this evening, but we do intend to post that and to share that widely with staff and our community following this meeting, and we'll continue to keep all the resources as current as possible and keep the information coming as we receive it.
Thank you for that. I guess really more of a comment than anything else. I mean, I said it earlier, and I've said it many times, every site is a story, every site is different across our district. And, I do appreciate the additional objectivity and how we're guiding the district to make decisions that prioritize the health and wellness of our teachers, students, staff, all of our employee groups, right? Because every site is a little bit different. I think every site is being impacted by this a little bit differently. So by having those variables that allow us to make those relevant decisions is appreciated. So thank you for that. Board members, any other questions, comments on this particular subject? Ms. Hill?
I just have one other question. Once again, I'm not sure if this question should be addressed to Mrs. Airy or Mr. Moss, but I wanted to verify or ask the question if the vaccines are mandatory for the teachers to take and the staff, or if this is something that they can opt in or opt out for if they have a choice.
I can take that one unless you want to get some screen time. No. Well, I would hope so, yes. No, they are not mandatory.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, if no other questions or comments from fellow board members. Dr. Reynolds, team, thank you very much. Mr. Moss, Ms. Airy, thank you both. All right, moving on to 9.2. Fiscal year 2022 budget process. Ms. Michelle Myers, welcome.
Well, good evening, President Sandoval, members of the governing board, Dr. Reynolds. Tonight, I'm going to present information related to the fiscal year 2020 budget process for the Peoria Unified School District. I will also summarize the fiscal year 2020 budget considerations and budget team involvement during the process. I will also be able to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. The annual budget process is part of the strategic perspective to solidify and adhere to effective policies, practices, and accountability for district resources. Specifically, district policy has budget process requirements in policies DA, DB, and DBC. The multi-month budget process is a collaborative effort that will include employee stakeholder input, governing board priorities, and administration's recommendations, as well as internal and external factors, including the effect of the annual funding levels and expenditures that have a state of Arizona input. The annual budget process is a combination of those internal and external factors, variable and fixed costs. In addition to the district priorities, variables include each year student enrollment levels. That's critical because public school districts are funded based on their ADM or their student enrollment. And as we've shared previously with COVID-19 this last year, we have seen a decrease in our student enrollment and ADM, as well as new state funding levels and mandates. An example of that would be Prop 206, the minimum wage increase. Health benefit insurance cost increases are another consideration. We just had our annual meeting with Valley Schools, and we have our projections for next year, and I'll talk a little bit about the budget team and one of the very first decisions and recommendations they'll be bringing to the governing board related to health insurance benefits. Utility costs, building operation costs are another consideration, as well as Arizona State Retirement System contributions for both the employee and the employer. And we do know there will be a small increase for next year as well. Fuel costs for transportation are another consideration, as well as contracted vendors. We have contracted substitute teachers, guest teachers. We have outsourced custodial services. So those outside vendor costs can be a consideration and a budget impact as we begin to plan the process for next year, as well as length of the staff work calendar. Dr. Davidson commented on that, and yes, our budget team has made recommendations in the last few years regarding a voluntary or an optional day for our certified classroom teachers. Well, based on available funding, that may be a recommendation. It has been in the past, and we'll see if we can do it, to make that an actual contract day, an extra day within the contract. And last but not least, voter-approved initiatives. Last year we talked about whether or not our M&O override would renew, and in November of 2020 it did, so that will be a budget consideration as well. Fiscal year 2021 was the last year that we received additional funding for the 20% by 2020 salary increase initiative for certified classroom teachers. So for next year, we're looking at funding considerations that include inflation funding that's related to Prop 123. That increases the base support level, as well as the continued restoration of additional district additional assistance, I should say, which is also referred to as capital funding, and funding that supports opportunities for enhanced student learning to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19, in addition to other COVID-19 related expenses. The budget process will also continue to support a multi-year compensation model and strategy for all employee groups with a phased-in approach for defined compensation outcomes. There will also continue to be a focus on consistent, equitable, and viable instructional resources and staff professional development opportunities that support student success. For several years, employee stakeholders have provided input into this process through a budget team work group. We have a representative or two here in the audience today. And the representatives are from our certified, classified, and administrative employees and association members. This year, the budget team consists of 34 members. You might recall last year I mentioned we had an increase from 18 to 30. We now have 34, and that's including participants from last year, as well as anyone who reached out and asked to be part of the process this year and had an interest to join the team. And so for this year, our work group, as I said, is 34 people, and it consists of 18 certified staff. That includes classroom teachers and certified staff that are providing support outside of the classroom, as well as 10 classified staff and 6 administrative representatives. The budget team will continue to provide input on budget priorities, including salary increases for employee groups, benefit renewals, retention stipends, professional growth recommendations, and changes to staffing levels, position reclassification recommendations, and performance pay amount. So historically, for several years, this work group has provided input for the recommendations, and as Dr. Davidson mentioned, we are finalizing our work with our EMS group. That is what we've been referring to as our compensation study 2.0, and as part of that work with the evaluation of our job descriptions and inputs from this third-party consultant, there may be some priorities associated with those recommendations as well. The budget team and administration will provide regular updates to the governing board in the form of either an in-person update at a board meeting or through a Friday report on the group's progress, and budget recommendations will be brought forward to the governing board for discussion and approval during the month of April. Historically, that is the month that we complete our work group activities and we bring forward recommendations. And as was the case rather last year, we will bring forward recommendations at one meeting and then recommendations again for a vote at a second meeting. So the governing board will have 2 meetings to consider the recommendations from administration and the budget team. And speaking of the budget team, on Monday, February 1st, we kick off our meetings. From 4 to 6 will be the timeline, and we have meetings set from the month of February through April. And again, we're looking forward to working with our employee stakeholders. And with that, That concludes the presentation, and I'm available to answer your questions at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. Board members, questions, comments? Ms. Pingrelli? No? Okay. Ms. Underhill? Dr. Sorensen?
I think this is off of memory, so if our contracts are gonna go out in March, then don't we talk about options or what those contracts will look like if this budget team is done in April? Or am I confusing things?
President Sandoval, Dr. Sorensen, members of the governing board, for the last several years, we have issued contracts with the employee's current salary, and there's language that then includes recommendations from the budget team and administration and governing board approval for final compensation increases. And Dr. Davison, would you like to add anything to that? No.
Okay. And so at this point in time, we do not have a good idea if our staff will have to pay more for their current or comparable medical benefits?
President Sandoval, Dr. Sorensen, on Monday, February 1st, there's actually going to be a presentation from Valley Schools to our budget team, as well as a presentation from our benefits team looking at our renewal and inputs and recommendations on whether or not that will be fully absorbed by the district or if there would be any rather impact on the employee. And in fact, that is one of the first items that we will bring back for a vote from our governing board on the recommendation. So we'll see that recommendation in February.
Okay, thank you. I think you already said that, so I apologize. I asked a question you already said. Thank you.
Ms. Hill?
I have no questions.
Thank you. Ms. No, that's okay. Do you have another question? Okay. Ms. Myers, I'm going to piggyback on something that Dr. Sorensen just said. You know, as you go through the process, and I know we've had this discussion before in and around, you know, individuals signing contracts without 100% knowledge of what their compensation and potential expenses may look like, right? But as you go through this process, knowing the diversity of the team, meaning from different employee groups, is there ever a time where, you know, those individuals, I don't want to say report back, but how does the progress of the conversations cascade down to all of our associates so they have somewhat of an understanding of, you know, what this looks like going into the subsequent school year?
President Sandoval, members of the governing board, all of our stakeholder representatives do bring input from their fellow colleagues in their employee groups to the meetings to provide thoughts, recommendations. As we go through our update process with the governing board, that is the main mechanism that the general field gets an update. And so this is a process we've had going back to the 2013-14 school year under the prior CFO, and we've continued this process. So it's not new, and those communication channels have been established several years ago.
Gotcha. Now, and I'm glad, you know, we continue to look at ways to establish world-class benefits for all of our associates, right? From a compensation perspective, as well as, you know, from a health and wellness perspective, you know, making sure that what we bring to them and how we serve them, you know, doesn't impact, you know, their paycheck at the end of the day. To include, you know, when we take a look at the ASRS, is that correct, the retirement system, and if there are any increases there, I know we've always absorbed, you know, that percentage as well, or I don't want to say always, because you give me that look. We have.
I think you might be referring to possibly the alternative contribution rate. When it comes to state retirement, and I know there's been a question with this before, so I'll clarify, there's an employee portion and an employer portion.
Right.
So the employee, as part of their long-term defined benefit with Arizona retirement system, they have to make the contribution. It's statutorily required.
No, agreed. But are there not times where, whether it's the district's portion that either lessens or, you know, at the state level, it increases, you know, a certain percentage, therefore, you know, let's say it increases 3%, right? And if that happens, you know, do we not, I guess, charge that to the associate? Do we, as a district, you know, take care of that, or is it split? And maybe I'm not fully understanding how the percentages are split between employee and employer as it relates to the state retirement system.
Thank you. There's a percentage, it's the same percentage for the employee and the employer. And for the district, it's a district expense. For the employee, it's similar to when you have a federal or a state tax or FICA and Medicare, it reduces their net pay.
Right.
So the state retirement employee portion is paid by the employee.
Okay. You talked about retention stipends, so, you know, thank you for that. I know that's one that we've worked on over the last couple of years to continue to grow, to show, you know, the value that we place in all of our employee groups across the district. You know, one of the things that I brought up, and hopefully in your discussions on Monday, also center around what all of our associates have gone through over this time, you know, since March of last year, and looking at, you know, a potential COVID stipend for all employee groups as we take a look at our budget and see if that's something that we can actually realize and pay out, you know, to our associates.
Our team will be discussing a number of options, and I agree with you. Our benefits package is definitely part of our employee compensation as a whole, and so we'll be very mindful of that, and we're looking forward to getting to work on Monday.
Perfect. No, thank you for that. If no further comments, sorry, Ms. Underhill, you had another question. Go ahead.
I apologize. In the presentation, it talked about funding and COVID-19, and I just wondered if we have yet gotten any additional information on the funding for education in the federal package, whether that would be competitive or a formula or both, and if we know yet if that could be like utilized for retention incentives and that kind of thing.
Thank you. President Sandoval, members of the governing board, in the Friday report, we did provide an overview on stipends and what's permissible under ESSER. ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 are very similar. As far as final amounts, we're awaiting those calculations from ADE. It's going to be based on Title 1A, similar to ESSER 1. So again, those monies are also intended to pay over more than one fiscal year into 2023 for PP&E and technology and nursing and a number of COVID-related expenses. So we'll look at all of our funding opportunities when it comes to compensation, and as a team, we'll be making recommendations and keeping you abreast along the way.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that, Ms. Underhill. No further questions, comments? Ms. Myers, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to 9.3, first read of policy section B, revisions. Looks like Dr. Davidson.
Actually, section B will be
Thank you.
me.
Sorry, I don't see a name, and I saw Dr. Davidson moving, so I've
Waving over, no. It is policy B. Thank you for that. We have two updates to our policies, and as you know, periodically we do bring you updates that come to us either as recommendations from ASBA or as we review our policies and look at continually updating language, making sure that that those are relative to what our current practice and obviously our current policy. And so Dr. Davidson will be bringing a few forward. The good news is with all of these policies, it's mostly housekeeping. So if you look at policies B and policy BEDG, these are simply through our review looking and identifying that we had not caught some of the updates as we've moved forward. So again, these updates that we recommend do not change any of our practice. They reflect our current practice and are available to answer any of your questions.
Perfect. Thank you.
So we're going to take B by itself, and then we'll come back and handle Dr. Davidson's.
All right. Board members, any questions, comments, anything? I mean, I know some of the changes were minimal as we read through them.
BE talks about our school board meetings. The changes are simply just kind of definition and explaining, following the law, that we're required to have a governing board meeting once a month. And in our minutes, we had some old language there, and we've updated it to a more modern look at how we communicate our governing board minutes.
Perfect. The only question I have is just around process and our policies. You know, obviously, we have updates that do come down from like ASBA, et cetera, and our own, housekeeping. Is that a quarterly or a monthly, how we review our policies? Is it more of when those do come down from, an authority, if you will, and we change them? I mean, I guess my question is in and around our process to ensure that our policies are as up to date, as they possibly can be.
Yeah, so it's an ongoing process. That would be my answer to that. So ASBA will periodically bring us updates, and that happens on a regular basis. When we bring those, if they're not imperative to the policy right now, we'll save those and we'll bring them to you kind of in a bunch as a recommendation. If you remember, we are currently, one of my goals is to work with our team to go through all of our Peoria-specific policies and identify any changes, and this is a reflection of that.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Board members, any questions, comments? Nope. So I do need a motion to approve the first read of policy section B revisions.
Actually, President Sandoval,
Is he going through B, D, G?
it's a first read,
Yep.
so you don't need to take action this evening.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Dr. D,
All right, thank you, President Sandoval, members of the board.
thank you
As-
for being patient with me this evening.
Certainly, you're welcome. As you see here, there's a variety of personnel-related policies that Peoria has adopted as our own, and there's just a few changes I wanted to highlight for you. The majority of them, as Dr. Reynolds said, are very much housekeeping. You'll see when you look at them, those areas that are bolded or highlighted, we put in there superintendent or designee, meaning the designee would be human resources. A lot of the policies there are supported through the work in my office, so certainly that is one thing we'd ask you to consider. The probably biggest change would be policy GCG that I just wanted to highlight, and that is the policy that talks about our substitutes. The one area that I'm asking us to please consider would be the removal of a portion there that talks about how the superintendent screens applicants, makes recommendations to the board and so forth. As you know, a few years ago, we began using a contracted agency for our guest teachers, and so I just wanted to align this policy with our current practice. So that's the removal of that piece on GCG, and other than that, I certainly stand for any questions that you have. Again, this is a housekeeping item, and you will see some additional policies from Section G come your way very soon. Some that, again, we need to further visit to align to our practice.
Thank you for that, Dr. Davidson. Board members, questions, comments on this first read? Sure, go ahead.
This is minor, but just like on the in-service training courses where it says superintendent or designee, so that means that could be a different member of cabinet if it was related to their position. Is that?
Certainly, President Sandoval, Ms. Underhill, that practice in which we work with our employees on professional growth ultimately does come through human resources, both classified and certified. But when there are questions, we do cross department lines, so to speak, to ensure that what we're approving is appropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ms. Underhill. Dr. Davidson, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along to Section 10, informational reports that are on our website. 10.1, district budget report for the month of December 2020. the budget, facilities, planning, and construction report, district enrollment reports for the month of November 2020, enrollment reports. Again, all these reports are on our website. Moving on to section 11, 11.1, board member opportunity to readdress agenda items. Ms. Hill, any items that you'd like to readdress on the agenda this evening?
No, thank you.
Dr. Sorensen?
No, sir.
All right, thank you, sir.
President Sandoval? We did move right over 10.6. If we could just request any agenda items, or I'm sorry, for board member opportunity to readdress items, it would be a good idea for you to back up and.
Sure. So I'm not bad.
Ms. Myers will be very disappointed if she doesn't get it to give her legislative update.
Ms. Myers, I apologize. I am clearly not batting 1,000 this evening, so I apologize. Ms. Myers.
Well, good evening, President Sandoval, members of the Governing Board. Dr. Reynolds, last week, the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, also referred to as the JLBC, released its January budget update, which includes activity from December of 2020. General fund revenues for fiscal year 2021 increased 17.9% from fiscal year 2020 and are $445.3 million above what was forecast. The Joint Legislative Budget Committee is attributing part of this increase to the deferral of income tax filings from April to July of last year, which contributed to 9.2% of the growth. The JLBC is predicting fiscal year 2022 general fund revenues will be in a range of $13.9 billion to $14.3 billion and projects fiscal year 2022 spending to be $12.3 billion, with a cash balance between $1.6 billion and $2 billion. This is much more positive data than what we shared last April. In fact, on April 9th, 2020, when the impacts of COVID-19 were first being evaluated, there was a concern that there could be a $1.1 billion revenue shortfall in 2021. Fortunately, this projection was revised, and the recently released data shows that the state of Arizona could be on track for a $2 billion surplus for fiscal year 2022. Thank you.
That's great news. Thank you. All right, moving on to section 11, other business, 11.1, board member opportunity to readdress agenda items. Ms. Underhill.
No, I don't have any, thank you.
All right, Ms. Pingarelli. All right, and I have gone through Ms. Hill and Dr. Sorensen. I don't have anything either. All right, 11.2, request for agenda items for future governing board meetings. Ms. Hill, any items that you'd like to request for a future governing board meeting?
None at this time.
Dr. Sorensen? No, sir. Ms. Underhill?
I just have one, and it could be a Friday report or whatever, but I don't know about how the dual enrollment process works, and so sort of what the benefits are for staff that teach those classes, and what our partnership, the benefit is for the district and the partners. So just curious on that one. Thank you.
I'll second that. Ms. Pingarelli?
Nothing this evening.
Thank you, ma'am. I don't have anything either. All right, moving on to section 12. 12.1, adjournment. I do need a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that. Ms. Contra, we have a motion by Ms. Underhill, a second by myself. Board members, please cast your votes. All right, motion passes 5-0. Meeting adjourned at 7:49. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.